All right, it's the Big Fat American Rock Show. I'm Zach Martin, and today for Rock Bio, we have Vivian Campbell. Vivian Campbell, today is your rock and roll biography. Tell us who you are.
Well, how much time you got?
Well, as much time as you need.
I have a rather colorful resume. Let me work backwards. So for the last 27 years, I've been a member of Def Leppard, and that's been very, very exciting. And this year is no less exciting for us. We're about to go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at the end of March, and had a very, very busy 2018. Doing a co-headline North American tour with Journey, sold over 1 million tickets in North America, a bit around the world, actually, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, UK. And, yeah, so that's great. Now, when I'm not working with Def Leppard, I'm working with Last in Line, which is my project band. A very serious project band, because like I said, when I'm not working with Leppard, I'm pretty much doing shows or recording with Last in Line, and we just released our second album, appropriately titled 2, because it really does sound like a band's second album to me. We really find our sound with that, and we're very pleased about that. That came out on Frontiers Records on February 22nd, and we're doing live shows around the country to promote that. And so going back further, I was in Whitesnake version 37A for about 15 minutes back in the late 1980s. That was a lot of fun. Prior to that, I've done records with a band called River Dogs. I've done records with Lou Gramm from Foreigner. And I was part of the original Dio band for the Holy Diver, Last in Line, and Sacred Heart albums before I got fired back in the early 80s. And in fact, Last in Line is the remnants of the original Dio band. Right now, it's only Vinny Appice, the drummer, and myself who are the only two surviving members. But we did start that project about a year after Ronnie Dio had passed away with Jimmy Bain, the original bass player. Jimmy unfortunately passed away in 2016. And yeah, so that's what we do. That's kind of part of my career. I've left a bunch of stuff out because it goes on and on.
Well, we'll get to more of that, but let me first offer my condolences for the loss of your bandmates. I know that's always a tough thing to go through. And the one thing that I've learned over the years, Vivian, is there's no such thing as closure. It's just time goes by.
Yes, indeed. And we in Last in Line, we still remember Jimmy every show we play, and we dedicate a song to him, and he's always there with us, indeed.
Well, I do the same sort of thing. I worked with Scott Muni, who used to work at NEW back in the day. You might have met him, the old guy with the gravelly voice playing Def Leppard on the radio here in New York City. And I don't think there's a day that goes by where I don't think of him or mention him or laugh about something that we did together. We were good mates. And when you lose somebody that's very close to you, I think it's the right thing to do. And in a way, Vivian, they're even closer to you when they're not present with you, if that makes sense. They're part of your heart,
That's understandable, of course, yeah. And then speaking of which, my 27 years in Def Leppard are only as a result of the passing of Steve Clark, the original guitar player. And when we were inducted in the Hall of Fame, I know that we'll all be remembering Steve. He was such a great part of the band, and his music lives on to this day. Every night I'm on stage with Def Leppard, I'm playing Steve Clark's music. So I even though I never knew him as a person, I really feel like I know him as an artist, because I'm inside of that music, and I've reshaped it in my own style to a certain extent over 27 years, but obviously, still paying homage to Steve and the great talent that he was.
That's fantastic. So you keep Steve's spirit alive. That's really cool. Now, you mentioned that you got fired from a rock band. Now, I don't know what you have to do to get fired by a rock band. Could you especially when they go, go ahead. Tell us how you got fired.
I've been fired from two.
All right.
One wasn't enough, and two consecutive ones. Well, I was fired from the original Dio band, and a couple of years later, I was fired from version 37A of Whitesnake. I was fired from both those bands for very different reasons. yeah, and it wasn't for bad behavior. I mean, I'm not like, the stereotypical rock star guy. I don't have a tattoo on my body. I've never done cocaine. I'm a musician, and it's always been my passion, and I've been very fortunate in my career with so many great bands and artists. But no, I got fired from Dio over principle. I mean, some people would dumb it down and say it was over money. Yeah, you could say that was part of the equation, but it was the principle of the money. It wasn't the dollar amount that got me fired. But that's a long story, and it's been represented and misrepresented in many ways over the decades. It's I think I'm going to have to write a book to clarify all of that. But in short, the original Dio band was myself, Jimmy Baines, Vinny Appice, and Ronnie Dio, and the band was formed in a rehearsal room in North London in I think it was September or October of 1982, and a promise was made, and a few years down the line, the promise wasn't kept, and I was very vocal about it, and that got me fired from the band. So the Whitesnake thing was a difficult issue, because the Whitesnake has always been and will always be David Coverdale's band, and we all knew that. But there were certain issues going on within the band and with band wise.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I understand that. That's not the first time. It happened to Aerosmith, from what I understand. But what really always cracked me up? When you knew that a lot of the guys in some bands were doing drugs and they fired one of the other guys for doing drugs. I'm thinking, how bad of a druggie are you to get fired by other druggies? Man, come on now. You don't have to get you don't have to get too specific. It's just, I think it's a funny thing to say you got fired from a rock band. And in a way, you're my hero. That's like getting fired at a radio station. You're not doing your job well unless you get fired a few times.
Apparently so, yeah.
Yeah, and what you should do is write your experience. Instead of doing a book, write an article for the HBR so that you can be one of the very few rock and rollers who have an article in the Harvard Business Review. See? And since we're on the subject, this is a way to really blow people's minds, and this will help you out. I like to read things like the Harvard Business Review and just remember a couple of the sentences and the words that I see, and I'll use them in a sentence for an answer, and that usually kills the conversation. I can move on. They go, oh, my gosh, that guy is so brilliant. Did you hear what he just said? So you can use that one on your own. So let's go back even further, because I always find this interesting. Who gave you, or how did you come across, and I'm going to assume it's a guitar, but your first musical instrument?
Well, I first knew I wanted to be a guitar player when I saw Mark Bolan and T-Rex on a show called Top of the Pops.
Yes.
It was a Thursday night on BBC One. I think it was probably about 1971, maybe 72. I'm not sure. It was one or the other. I was 9 or 10 years old, and everything about Bolan. I mean, it just the whole aura, the hair, the image, the clothes, the Les Paul. That's what first turned me on to it. I just had an epiphany, and from that moment on, I knew I wanted to get a guitar and learn how to play, and I wanted to grow my hair. And it took a few years after that before I actually did get a guitar. I kept pestering my parents, and I think after a couple of years, they realized that I was serious. And I will give a shout out to my dear departed father, who was my biggest fan. I mean, he really believed in me when nobody else did, and I remember one night he came back and he had this little acoustic guitar, and that was the first instrument I ever had, and I kept badgering him for years afterwards, and eventually he enabled me to get an electric guitar and an amplifier and so on and so forth. And then in later years, when I actually was with Dio, doing the Holy Diver tour, our first tour, I remember my father flew out to a bunch of shows, and he just used to like to have his all access Lammy and just hang out and be at the side of the stage. And that was great. And my first ever gold album was for Holy Diver. And my father was also called Vivian. And so, my first ever gold album was presented to Vivian Campbell for sales of 500,000 copies of Holy Diver. And I've never been one to hang those awards on walls. To this day, I've never hung one. But I did give that first one to my father, and he hung it in his office, which was an interesting conversation piece when people would walk in his office, because he was not in the music business, but he had a gold album. So that's how I got started, and that's kind of what did it to me.
I got a feeling your dad, Vivian, would go to the local pub and tell the girls that he was a guitarist for Dio.
No, he wouldn't go quite that far.
Because I know I would.
He was the original Vivian Campbell, which you can't argue with,
That's good. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. There's two different questions, and it's got to do with other groups besides Last in Line. We'll get to what you guys are doing in a few minutes. I had Vinny Appice on last week. I'm friends with his brother Carmine Appice. I can't figure out why they both say their last names differently. And then there's their brother Fred, who says it completely different from the other two. So that must be one crazy family, right?
It is. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Let's spill the beans. What's so crazy about these guys? Tell me some of the dirty laundry.
Sure why. I think Carmine was the first one to change the pronunciation of the name. I believe, from what Vinny told me, goes back to the 1970s when Carmine was playing drums with Rod Stewart.
Yep.
And decided to have a different pronunciation for his name. I believe the way that Vinny pronounced it, Vinny Appice, is the way that his parents pronounced the name. And I believe that the way their third brother, Frank, I believe, pronounced it Appice, which is more the Italian dialect. That's my understanding of it. I mean, it's pretty strange. You have these three brothers, and each one of them has a different pronunciation of their surname. But I don't have that problem with Campbell. It's pretty straightforward,
No, but I think a lot of people might get you confused with other Campbells in rock and roll. Does that happen to you a lot?
No, actually, it doesn't. There's not that many. I mean, there's Glenn, of course. There's Phil Campbell, who played guitar with Motorhead for a while. Mike Campbell, who is currently with Fleetwood Mac, and of course with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers for decades. There's only several of us that I'm aware of. Yeah.
There's
not many Vivians, though. I'm certainly the only Vivian that plays guitar that I'm aware.
What you guys should do is all take the 23andMe or the Ancestry.com to see if you're all related to the Rolling Stones. Now, let's talk about the other music that we're going to get to. Man, I kind of slipped my mind because I had a good question and I forgot it. You know how that goes. When it comes to Led Zeppelin, how long did it take you to realize that Led Zeppelin was a great cover band?
You referring to their blues influence?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, you take Led Zeppelin 1, 2, 3, and a few others, and you listen to those songs, you realize, well, that was Willie Dixon over there, and that's Robert Johnson over there. Memphis Minnie is When the Levee Breaks. So I thought that was pretty interesting how they were able to, I asked that. The same thing of Robert Plant, and he goes, "They're not covers, they're interpretations," and he kind of got mad at me. But I gotta ask. I mean, they are the world's, to me, one of the world's greatest bands, and I love Led Zeppelin. I can't tell you how many times that I've gone down to St. Mark's Place and gone to the Physical Graffiti building just to take a picture, and I also passed by Electric Lady Studios, which is on 8th Street. Which is a fascinating place in New York. But back to the question I asked you, when did you realize that that's what they were doing?
Not until later years, I did a blues album in 2004 or 2005, a bunch of blues covers. And for about a year preceding the making of that record, I really kind of immersed myself in the blues. And, I would just, thanks to the internet and iTunes, I could go out there and link from one thing to another and kind of connect the dots. The blues has always been a big influence for me because my first actual guitar hero, the first album I owned, the first concert I saw, and the first guitar player I tried to emulate was a guy called Rory Gallagher, who was an Irish blues guitar player, blues rock, and Rory his big hero was Muddy Waters. But I'd heard the name, I'd heard all these names in the past. I didn't really understand the music much until that year leading up to my Making a Blues record, and it was quite an interesting discovery, you know. And then, like you say, like the whole Willie Dixon thing, I think we probably wrote most of the blues songs ever written, you know. And you do actually realize just how much of an influence these people had on rock and roll. You know, it's something that kind of gets glossed over a lot, and still to this day, I mean, it all kind of filters down, you know, when you listen to, you know, Jimmy Rogers playing and how that was picked up and interpreted by Jimi Hendrix and so on and so forth. And there is such a great lineage and such a great debt of gratitude that we as modern rock guitar players owe those people who really kind of forged that path for us, you know. It's so much easier nowadays to put all that together and to, you know, to learn how to play an instrument and to make a career as a musician. I mean, back then it was anything but.
We're talking with Vivian Campbell. Last in Line is their latest project. They got a new album. Is it out right now, or is it just coming out? I get the dates confused.
It just came out February 22nd, our second album, and it's just simply called Two.
And you're going out on tour, obviously. So if you go and follow you guys on Twitter, for instance, you get the tour dates. Now I'm going to ask you a question about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And this disc jockey that I mentioned before, it's a girl, I guess, in a Los Angeles area radio station, and she asked you, who's going to do the introduction? And I'll just let you answer that, and you don't have to give the name, but I think I will let everybody just think about who it most likely is going to be. I think they'll be able to figure it out based on the sort of answer you gave her. So who's going to introduct Def Leppard into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Probably a guitar player, and it could be the guitar player from Led Zeppelin.
Oh, really? That's good. Or it could be a guy who, I don't know, might be an astrophysicist, something like that.
It could be. Or it could be the guitar player from Led Zeppelin.
Oh, okay. It could be the guitar player from Led Zeppelin. Or it could be the other guy. Who knows? But
or it could be someone else entirely.
Or how about, you know, I think maybe you should rethink this and get John Paul Jones to do it, because I think bass players, they always get lost in the shuffle. Poor bass players, they don't get any love, right?
This is true. John Paul Jones in particular, I think kind of got lost in that shuffle.
Okay. All right.
So maybe it'll be Robert Plant, you know.
Well, yes, but just don't let on that you know that a lot of the early Led Zeppelin were cover songs, because he'll get upset about that. And he'll tell you their interpretations.
I won't bring it up to Robert. I will not mention it.
All right, Vivian Campbell. Now, here's one of the big rock and roll debates that we've had at the kitchen table many times here in the United States. I don't know if you have a position on this, but when it comes to Van Halen, are you a David Lee Roth Van Halen, or are you a Sammy Hagar Van Halen?
David Lee Roth, no doubt.
David Lee Roth. You didn't even think twice about that. All right.
No, I mean, that was part of the original character of the band. There was a humor in early Van Halen that came across in the music. You know, and that was essentially Dave Lee Roth's input on that. You know, he wasn't a tremendous vocalist, but he had a tremendous style and a unique character and personality. And that was as important to the early band as Eddie's guitar playing and Alex's drumming and Michael Anthony's bass playing. I mean, they were a great band, the original band. That's not to detract in any way from Sammy Hagar, who's a remarkable singer. And what they did with Sammy was different. I mean, it was good, but it was different, and it was a little more mainstream to my ears. It was also, you know, not just Sammy's influence that changed the sound of Van Halen. It was also around the same time that Eddie discovered a keyboard, you know, which is all well and good, but I preferred listening to him as a guitarist. So, you know, that those two elements definitely reshaped the sound of the later Van Halen, but I'm very much a fan of the early band.
What is the favorite song that you've been part of in the recording that you would say, hey, Vivian, what's your favorite song that you've ever recorded? What would that be?
That's hard to say. I haven't always been very happy with what I've done in the studio, although that has changed of late. I mean, in the last few years, I'm very pleased with my playing and my performing and my writing. And the latest Last in Line album, the 2 album, I think is some of my best playing, and certainly some of the playing I'm most happy with. I remember, like, all throughout my career, listening back, and thinking, gosh, I wish I could have done that again. I could do it better or whatever. That's part of the Virgo in me, I guess, never being satisfied with stuff. But it was also sort of a lack of confidence. And, I think when you're a younger musician, you're still always trying to emulate other people. Like, I was always trying to emulate my heroes. Rory Gallagher and Gary Moore were my 2 biggest influences as a guitar player. And, so it takes a while for you to feel comfortable, or for me at least. It took me a while to grow into my own skin and to be comfortable and confident with my playing. And I certainly am right now. I mean, I feel like I'm really very much where I need to be as a musician, as a guitar player, and I'm more than happy with this Last in Line 2 record.
I think that's a great way to think of those kind of things. I got a confession to make. I never listen to any of the interviews that I do with people, ever. I just do them once and put them up online, and I never hear them again. I don't want to hear myself on the radio. The voice tracking thing bothers me. I don't want to, it comes back to when I was a young broadcaster. I used to work with this great disc jockey, Mark Coppola. You might have heard of the Cope. And we would take our air checks, and I was going out with my girlfriend at the time. She became my wife. And as we were driving around New York City, and Mark Coppola would be on the radio, the Cope, and I'd go, listen, I got to listen to my air check. And I put it in the player, and she would try to talk to me and go, shh. Do you know she almost broke up with me because I was so focused on listening to my air check? So after a while, I just gave up on listening because any improvements that I could possibly make were not going to happen. I was just as good as it was going to be, so I gave up on that. But I just wanted to share that just to let you know you're not the only one.
I can believe it, yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
looking forward to seeing Last in Line. I can't wait. I know that you're going to eventually get over in the New York City area. When you do, I'd like to have you guys stop over at the studio, and we don't even have to do any interviews or anything. What we could do is hang out and have pizza and just start busting on people. It'll be a lot of fun. Would you like that?
Yeah.
I'm
done with that. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, completely different. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
I don't know.
Oh, all right. I'll take care of that.
I'm personally not on Twitter, but I know Last in Line's on Twitter and Facebook
it is.
And
I'll
all
tell
that
you,
stuff. But
it's at Last in Line. And there's all kinds of great videos. You can sample the songs. So Twitter at Last in Line. The album is on sale via Amazon. And I do believe I saw that it's available on vinyl, right? Am I right about that?
It is, yeah. I mean, a lot of people like vinyl,
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
$1 billion industry. And guess what else is coming back, which is good for Def Leppard? Cassettes.
What's that?
Cassettes.
Oh, cassettes, really? Wow.
Everybody listened to Def Leppard on their cassettes. They were their first real cassette act, Def Leppard. I mean, I did have all the albums. Ooh, I was just thinking, you guys, Def Leppard is the reason why MTV became successful. And I remember my sister going, did you check out these guys, Def Leppard? And everybody thought that Def Leppard was hotter than pepper pudding. And I think it's a shanda that it took so long for Def Leppard to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You talk a bunch of, right? I mean, think about all of the great songs from Def Leppard. And that's one box set that I wouldn't mind dropping $400 or $500 on. It's amazing. And the fact that you had to wait this long to get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, my humble opinion, shanda. But I'm glad you're going. I can't wait to see Jimmy Page induct you into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or Brian May, or how about Paul Rogers? Or if you want me to do it, I don't think I'm busy that night. I could do that.
Paul Rogers. That sounds like a good one. Yeah,
I can make that happen for you. I could make that happen. All right. Well, thank you very much, Vivian. It was certainly a lot of fun talking to you, and I look forward to seeing you in person when you come through New York. We'll have that pizza. The beer's on me. Oh, do you watch Father Ted by any chance? You ever seen that?
Oh, yes, I've watched Father Ted.
All right, This is fantastic. Yesterday was the anniversary of the death of the guy who played Father Jack and Father Ted himself.
Yeah.
They both died in the same day. But I think that is one of the funniest, underrated comedies of all time, Father Ted.
Sure, it's Mad Ted,
It's definitely Mad Ted. Definitely. As you know, I'm quite, what did he say during The Milkman, Pat Mustard? Dougal says, as you know, I'm cynical, right? Oh, that was it. Or something to those effect. Just a funny thing. All right, well, take care. God bless.
Nice one, Zach. Keep it well.
Bye-bye.